Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different.
A little more focused, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Usually we take a big topic and sort of explore the edges. But today we're getting laser focused. We're looking at a set of sources titled Architectural Foundations of United States Constitutional Law.
Which sounds incredibly dry, I know.
It does. But before you think this is just for law students and hit skip, hold on.
It is for law students, but
Yeah.
it's also for, everyone. It's basically the operating system for the entire country.
Exactly. And we have a very specific mission today. We know a lot of you listening right now are in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
You're staring down the barrel of the bar exam. You've had way too much coffee. You haven't slept in a week. And you are just so tired of reading dense, incomprehensible legal texts.
We've been there. Oh, have we been there?
Oh.
It's that feeling that the law is just this giant random list of rules you have to memorize. It's completely overwhelming.
So our goal today, our entire mission, is to serve you, the bar exam candidate. We are going to take these architectural foundations and translate them
Into plain English.
into plain, simple English. We're going to use concrete scenarios, hypotheticals you can actually picture in your head.
Mhm.
So when you see that wild fact pattern on the exam, you're not panicking.
You're spotting the issue.
You spot the issue, check the box, and you move on.
And hey, if you aren't taking the bar, stick around. Because understanding this stuff is basically understanding the rule of the game we're all playing every single day.
Okay, let's start with the hook from the source material itself. It talks about the Constitution as a house. I love this.
It's a perfect metaphor. If you want to understand a house, you don't start by arguing about the paint color in the guest bedroom.
No.
You look at the foundation, you check the load-bearing beams, you see if the roof is sound. The structure comes first.
Right. And that's the whole argument here. Constitutional law isn't just a list of do's and don'ts. It is a structural framework. It is the blueprint that builds the entire house of government. If you get the blueprint, you get the law.
Precisely. You understand why the walls are where they are.
So we've got a roadmap today based on that blueprint. We're covering the three massive pillars of this constitutional house. First up, we've got the federal machine.
Who gets to do what? The president, Congress, the courts. Who's in charge of which part of the house?
Then the second pillar, the federal system. This is all about relationships. How do the feds and the states play nice in the sandbox? Or not so nice?
And how do the states play nice with each other? The neighbor-to-neighbor rules.
And finally, the third pillar, the one everyone thinks of when they hear the word Constitution, individual rights.
The shield.
The shield. How does this document actually protect you from the government you just built? We're talking free speech, religion, property, all of it.
It's a really clean structure. Powers, federalism, and rights. If you can keep those three buckets straight in your head on exam day, you're already halfway there. You're going to crush it.
All right, let's dive into that first pillar, the federal machine. The source material breaks this down into the big three articles of the Constitution, Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3.
The separation of powers. And I love that the notes compare this to a game of rock, paper, scissors.
It's so good. Rock, paper, scissors, but for running a country.
It's all about checks and balances. The framers were, frankly, terrified of concentrated power. They just fought a war against a king.
Right.
So they took the power of government and they smashed it into three distinct pieces. The idea was to make sure no single branch could ever become a tyrant. They're designed to be in conflict.
Let's actually mix it up and start with Article 3. The judiciary, the courts,
The referees?
the referees, right. Article 3 vests the judicial power in one Supreme Court and then whatever lower courts Congress decides to create. But here's the key concept. The source material says tricks up students constantly. Jurisdiction.
Specifically, subject matter jurisdiction. This is so critical. In movies and TV, a court is just where you go to get justice for anything. But Article 3 is actually incredibly stingy. It limits federal courts to only hearing cases and controversies.
Okay, let's unpack that phrase, cases and controversies. It sounds like just a legal jargon for a fight.
It is, but it's a fight with a very specific set of rules. The most important one is that it means federal courts do not give advice. They do not issue advisory opinions.
Okay, let's run a hypothetical for all the bar preppers out there.
Yeah.
Imagine the president is in the Oval Office. He's working on a huge, controversial new bill. He wants to make sure it's legally sound. So he picks up the phone and calls the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He says, "Hey, Chief, we're about to pass this thing. Can you guys just take a quick look. Let me know if it's constitutional. I don't want to waste everyone's time if it's just going to get struck down in a year.
The Chief Justice has to hang up the phone.
Really?
Or, more politely, say, Mr. President, with all due respect, we cannot help you.
But why? It would save the country millions of dollars in future lawsuits. It seems so inefficient.
It doesn't matter. The court cannot act on a hypothetical. They can't pre-approve laws. They can only act when there's a live dispute. Someone has to have actually been harmed by the law. They have to be suing someone else over that harm, and there has to be a real remedy the court can provide.
So it prevents the court from becoming a sort of super legislature.
Exactly. It keeps them from roaming around, fixing laws before they're even broken. They have to wait for a foul to be committed on the field before they can blow the whistle.
They can't call a foul during warm-ups.
Perfect analogy.
Okay, another hypothetical about the courts. This one touches on something called diversity jurisdiction, which the notes say is a huge topic for the exam.
Huge. It's on there every time.
Okay, let's say I live in New York. You live across the river in New Jersey.
Enjoying the Garden State.
I sell you a boat. A very expensive boat. I tell you, it's the best boat ever made. You take it out on the Hudson for its maiden voyage, and it immediately sinks.
I am furious.
You are furious. You want to sue me for the value of the boat? Let's say it's $100,000.
I am definitely suing you for $100,000.
The question is, where do you sue me? Can you drag me into federal court over this?
Yes, you can. This is the classic example of diversity jurisdiction. The Constitution and the federal laws that enforce it allow federal courts to hear cases between citizens of different states.
Okay, but why? Why not just sue me in New York State court or New Jersey State court?
The founders were worried about what they called home cooking.
Home cooking.
Bias. If a New Jersey guy sues a New York guy in a New York State court, in front of a New York judge and a New York jury, well, they might be a little biased toward their neighbor. The idea was to create a neutral playing field.
So the federal court is like the neutral territory, the Switzerland for lawsuits.
Exactly. But there are rules. It's not for any old case. First, you have to be from different states. We've got that covered. And second, there's usually a money requirement.
The source calls this the amount in controversy.
Right. For the statute that governs this, the case has to be worth more than $75,000.
So in our boat scenario, the boat was $100,000. We're good.
We're good. We're heading to federal court.
But what if I just, I don't know, scratched the bumper on your car and the damage was only $5,000?
Then the federal court slams the door in your face. Go to state small claims court, they'll say. Federal courts are for big, significant disputes between diverse parties. They don't have time for fender benders.
Got it. Okay, so that's the judiciary, the referees. Let's move to the engine of the machine. Article 1. The legislature, Congress.
The longest article by far. The rulemakers.
Now, the source material has a warning here in big, bold letters. It says, Congress does not have police power.
This is the number one thing you have to unlearn from just living in the world and watching TV. We see the FBI, we see all these federal laws, and we just assume Congress can do whatever it wants for the good of the country.
And they can't.
They cannot.
So what is police power?
Police power is the general inherent authority of a government to pass laws to protect the health, safety, welfare, and morals of its community. States have this. The state of California can pass a law that says no spitting on the sidewalk just because they think it's gross and unhealthy.
And Congress can't do that for the whole country.
No. Congress has what are called enumerated powers. They have a specific shopping list of things they're allowed to do, and it's mostly found in Article 1, Section 8. If the power isn't on that list, Congress can't do it.
So Congress couldn't pass a National No Spitting Act?
Not directly.
Right.
Not just because it's a good idea. They would have to somehow prove that spitting has a substantial effect on the national economy or something. The much higher bar.
Okay, so let's look at the big 3 items on that shopping list. These are the ones the bar exam will test you on over and over because they're the most powerful. First up, the Commerce Clause.
The heavyweight champion of congressional power. The text says Congress has the power to regulate commerce among the several states.
Interstate commerce.
Right. Commerce that crosses state lines.
Let's do a scenario. I own a trucking company. We'll call it Deep Dive Logistics.
Catchy? Business is booming, I hope.
Oh, it's booming. I have a fleet of trucks. They pick up widgets in Buffalo, New York, and they drive them down the highway to a warehouse in Newark, New Jersey.
That is the textbook slam dunk definition of interstate commerce. You are physically crossing a state line with goods for a commercial purpose.
So Congress can regulate me.
Oh, absolutely. Congress can set the safety standards for your truck tires. They can dictate how many hours your drivers have to rest. They can regulate the emissions coming out of your tailpipes. Why? Because if every single state had different rules for trucks, our national economy would grind to a halt. You'd need a different kind of truck for every state you drive through. It would be chaos.
Okay, that makes sense. That's the easy version. But the source material hints that it goes much, much deeper than that. What if I'm not crossing state lines?
This is where it gets really interesting and really powerful. The Supreme Court has said that even if your activity is entirely inside one state, purely local Congress can still regulate it if it has a substantial economic effect on interstate commerce.
Okay, I need a hypothetical for that. That sounds abstract.
Sure, this is based on a famous case. Imagine you're a farmer. You own a small farm in Kansas. You grow a little bit of wheat in your backyard.
Okay.
You don't sell it. You don't ship it anywhere. You just feed it to your own family and your own chickens. The wheat never leaves your property.
That sounds about as local as you can get. How can Congress regulate that?
Well, the Supreme Court's reasoning was this. What if every farmer did that? What if millions of farmers all decided to grow their own wheat and drop out of the national market?
The national market for wheat would collapse.
It would be destroyed. Prices would go haywire.
Yeah.
So because your little local activity, when you add it up with everyone else's in the aggregate, has a substantial effect on the national machine, Congress can actually regulate the wheat you grow in your own backyard.
Wow. That's incredibly expansive.
It is very, very broad. The takeaway for the exam is, if you see a question involving a business activity, pretty much any business activity, the answer is almost certainly that Congress can regulate it under the Commerce Clause.
Okay, power number 2 on the list, taxing and spending.
The power of the purse.
The source material calls this power the bribe.
It's not a bad way to think about it. It essentially is a bribe. Sometimes Congress wants the states to do something, but they don't have the direct power to force them. Like, a great example is setting the national drinking age. That's a local health and safety issue. That's police power. So Congress can't just pass a law saying the drinking age in all 50 states is now 21.
So what do they do instead?
They open the federal checkbook. They go to the states and say, hey, we've got billions and billions of dollars in federal highway funds. You guys want some money to repair your roads.
And of course the states say, yes, please.
And then Congress says, great, here's the check. But there's a string attached. If you take this money, you have to pass your own state law raising your drinking age to 21.
And that's constitutional. That feels like blackmail.
It's constitutional. It's called conditional spending. As long as the condition is related to the spending in drunk driving, is certainly related to highway safety, and it's not overly coercive, it's perfectly valid.
So they can't command you, but they can make it really, really expensive to say no.
That's the power of the purse in a nutshell.
Okay, third big power. The necessary and proper clause. This one sounds like a giant loophole, the do whatever you want clause.
It's often called the elastic clause because it stretches. But listen to me very carefully. Everyone's studying for the bar. This is a trap.
How is it a trap?
The necessary and proper clause is not a standalone power. You can never, ever, ever just say, Congress did this because it is necessary and proper. Period. Full stop.
It has to be connected to something else.
It has to be the tail on the dog. It must be necessary and proper to execute another one of the enumerated powers. It's a helper power.
Okay, let's build a scenario.
Let's do it. Article I gives Congress the power to establish post offices and post roads. That's on the list. An enumerated power.
Check.
But if you read Article 1, Section 8, it does not explicitly say Congress has the power to make it a federal crime to steal mail.
That's true, it doesn't.
But think about it. If you build a post office and people can just walk in and steal all the packages with no consequences, the post office doesn't really work, does it?
No, it's useless.
So creating a criminal law against mail theft is necessary and proper to carry out the primary power of establishing the post office in the first place.
It's what makes the main power effective. It supports the main beam of the house.
Precisely. So on the multiple choice section of the exam, if you see an answer choice that just says this law is valid under the necessary and proper clause, it's wrong, is the trick answer.
No.
If the answer says this law is valid under the necessary and proper clause as applied to the postal power, that's the one you pick. It has to be linked.
That is a critical, critical distinction. Okay, we've done the referees, the courts, the engine Congress. Now for the final piece of the machine, the enforcer. Article 2, the executive, the president.
The president is the commander-in-chief of the military and the head of the whole executive branch. His primary job is to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. He enforces the laws Congress passes.
But he has some of his own unique tools. The source notes highlight the veto and the pardon.
The veto is his check on Congress. It forces them to negotiate with him. But let's focus on the pardon because it is an absolute favorite on the bar exam.
The power to just wipe a criminal conviction clean.
The Constitution says the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States.
Okay, offenses against the United States. What does that mean in practice?
It means federal crimes. Only federal crime.
Okay, hypothetical time. This is the classic trap you mentioned. I am a bad guy.
You're always the bad guy in these.
I am. It's more fun. I go and I rob a liquor store in downtown Seattle.
Okay.
The Seattle police catch me. I'm charged, tried, and convicted under Washington state law for armed robbery. I'm sentenced to 10 years. But hey, I went to college with the president. We're old pals. I call him up and say, buddy, old pal, can you help me out here? Pardon me. Can he do it?
No, he absolutely cannot.
But he's the president of the United States.
He is the president of the federal government. He has zero authority over the sovereign criminal laws of the state of Washington. That's a state crime, prosecuted by state officials in a state court. He can only pardon you if you violated a federal law like robbing a federally insured bank or committing mail fraud or federal tax evasion.
So if you see a state crime on the exam, the president is powerless.
Completely powerless. You'd need a pardon from the governor of Washington for that one.
Okay, that wraps up the federal machine. We have the three branches pushing and pulling and checking each other. Now, let's zoom out to Pillar 2, the federal system.
This is federalism. It's the constant, ongoing negotiation between the national government in Washington, D.C., and the 50 individual state governments.
And the main question here, the one that comes up over and over again, is who wins in a fight?
That is the essential question of federalism, yes.
The source material points us directly to the Supremacy Clause in Article 6.
And the language is about as clear as it gets. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land.
Supremacy. It sounds pretty definitive.
It is. It means that if there's a direct conflict between a valid federal law and a state law, the federal law wins. The state law is void. This principle is called preemption.
Let's do a hypothetical. The United States government, using its power to regulate foreign commerce, signs a treaty with Ecuador. The treaty says the United States will import all the bananas that Ecuador can possibly grow.
Okay. Foreign trade. Clearly a federal power.
But the state of Georgia says, wait a minute, we're the peach state. We grow peaches here. We don't want a flood of cheap Ecuadorian bananas competing with our local peach farmers. So the Georgia legislature passes a law that says it is illegal to sell or import Ecuadorian bananas anywhere in the state of Georgia.
So we have a direct collision.
Right.
The federal treaty says yes, bananas. The state law says no bananas.
Who wins?
The feds win. The Supremacy Clause means the federal treaty preempts or overrides the state law. The Georgia law is struck down as unconstitutional. The bananas flow.
Okay, so the feds have the ultimate trump card, but surely the states have some kind of defense, right? It's not totally powerless. The source highlights the 10th Amendment.
Right. The Reserve Clause. This is the constitutional counterweight to federal power. The 10th Amendment says, and I'm paraphrasing here, any powers the Constitution didn't specifically give to the federal government and didn't prohibit the states from having are kept or reserved by the states.
So translate that for me.
It basically means if a power isn't on Congress's shopping list, then it belongs to the states.
And this goes back to that police power we talked about.
Exactly. Why do states get to issue marriage licenses? Why do states run public schools? Why do states set the rules for local zoning and property? Because those powers were never given to the federal government in the Constitution. So the 10th Amendment acts as a shield, protecting that traditional state turf.
So if Congress tried to pass a national uniform law for high school graduation requirements, the states would waive the 10th Amendment and say, get off our lawn, that's our job.
Precisely.
Now there's another shield the states have, and this one feels a little weird, the 11th Amendment. The source calls this the jurisdictional bar.
Ah, sovereign immunity. Yes, it sounds medieval because the concept is medieval. It comes directly from the Old English idea that you can't sue the king in the king's own court without his permission.
But we don't have kings.
No, but we have sovereign states. And the 11th Amendment essentially says that, as a general rule, you cannot sue a state in federal court for money damages without the state's consent.
So, hypothetical. The state of Kansas owns a fleet of snowplows. One of the drivers is being negligent, texting while plowing, and he smashes right into my parked car. I want to sue the state of Kansas for $10,000 in damages.
If you try to file that lawsuit in a federal district court, the judge will look at it and dismiss it immediately. The 11th Amendment protects the state treasury from being raided by lawsuits in a rival court system.
So I'm just out of luck. The state can just smash my car and get away with it.
Oh, no. You can almost certainly sue the state of Kansas in a Kansas state court under their own laws that allow for such lawsuits. Or you might be able to sue the snowplow driver as an individual, but you can't drag the sovereign state of Kansas into a federal court against its will.
That is a very specific procedural hurdle, but I have a feeling that's exactly the kind of thing that shows up on the bar exam.
It's an easy way to separate the students who know the nitty-gritty from those who don't.
Now let's talk about how the states are supposed to treat each other. Because, sometimes neighbors don't get along. The source lists two key clauses in Article 4, the Comity Clause and the Full Faith and Credit Clause.
These are the good neighbor rules of the Constitution.
Let's start with comity, which is also known as the Privileges and Immunities Clause of Article 4.
This clause is crucial. It prohibits states from discriminating against out-of-state residents when it comes to fundamental rights.
Fundamental rights. That sounds important. What does it usually mean in this context?
It almost always refers to economic activities, like your right to earn a living or core civil liberties.
Scenario time. I live in South Carolina. I'm a skilled electrician.
Okay.
I see there's a big construction boom happening just over the border in North Carolina, lots of jobs. So I drive up there to look for work. But North Carolina has passed a new law. It says, to protect our local workforce, only official residents of North Carolina can be hired for electrician jobs.
That is blatantly unconstitutional.
Why? Aren't they just trying to help their own citizens?
They are, but they can't do it that way.
Yeah.
The right to earn a living is considered fundamental to our national union. We are one country with one national economy. North Carolina cannot put up a wall at its border and treat you, a citizen of the United States, like a foreigner just because you have South Carolina plates on your truck.
Okay, but what about this twist? What if I go to North Carolina to go deer hunting for the weekend, and the state charges me $500 for an out-of-state hunting license, but they only charge North Carolina residents $50?
That is actually allowed.
Wait, hold on. How is that not discrimination? They're charging me 10 times more.
It is discrimination, but the court has said that things like recreational hunting or fishing are not fundamental rights for purposes of this clause. States are allowed to treat their own citizens better when it comes to recreational privileges or things that are subsidized by state taxpayers, like in-state tuition at a state university.
So the rule is they can't stop you from working, but they can charge you more to play.
That's a pretty good summary, yes.
Okay, now let's hit full faith and credit. This sounds like a slogan for a credit card.
It's close. It's about respecting the official paperwork, especially the court judgments of other states.
Okay, so scenario. I get into a messy business dispute with you in Florida. I lose. The Florida court issues a final judgment saying I owe you $50,000.
You'd better pay me.
I don't want to. So I pack up all my stuff, I drain my Florida bank account, and I move to Georgia. I say, you can't get me now. That's just a piece of paper from Florida. We're in Georgia.
You're going to be very disappointed. The Full Faith and Credit Clause requires the state of Georgia to recognize and enforce that valid Florida judgment.
So I can't just run away from my debts by crossing a state line.
Absolutely not. As long as the Florida court had proper jurisdiction and gave you a fair process, Georgia has to honor the result. You can't relitigate the whole case. If you could, our legal system would be pure chaos.
It's the legal glue that holds the country together across state borders.
Exactly right.
All right, we've built the machine, we've set the rules for the neighborhood, and now we get to the part everyone's been waiting for. Part 3. Individual rights. The shield.
This is where the focus of the Constitution shifts. It stops looking at the structure of government and starts looking at you, the person.
And it's important that we say person, not just citizen.
That's a key point. Many of these fundamental rights apply to anyone on U.S. soil, and in some cases, even to corporations.
Let's start with the big one, the First Amendment. Religion, speech, press, assembly, so much packed in there.
For the bar exam, you absolutely have to break religion down into its two distinct clauses, the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause.
Okay, the Establishment Clause.
This means the government cannot establish an official religion, no Church of America. But it goes deeper. The government can't favor one religion over another or favor religion over non-religion. It can't coerce you into religious activities.
So a public high school can't start every day with a mandatory Christian prayer over the loudspeaker.
Correct. That would be the government establishing a religious practice in a coercive environment. Classic violation.
And what about the other side of the coin, the free exercise clause?
That's your right to believe and to practice. The government generally cannot punish you or target you because of your religious beliefs. If you want to pray 5 times a day or wear a yarmulke or keep a kosher diet, the government has to leave you alone unless they have a really, really compelling reason not to.
Okay, now let's talk speech. The source material says, in all caps, political speech is the most protected.
It is the absolute core of the First Amendment. The whole point of the thing is that we, the people, can criticize our leaders and our government without being thrown in jail.
Hypothetical. The mayor of a small town is very thin-skinned. He absolutely hates that the local newspaper keeps writing editorials calling his policies incompetent.
A common problem for mayors, I imagine.
So he gets the city council to pass a new ordinance, it says. It is illegal for any publication to print articles that criticize the intelligence or competence of the mayor.
That is unconstitutional on its face. It's not even a close call.
Why?
It's a content-based restriction on core political speech. It's the government trying to silence its critics. This is exactly what the First Amendment was written to prevent.
Is there any defense for the mayor? Can he say it's to maintain public order?
None that would work. The mayor may hate it, his feelings might be hurt, but the First Amendment commands that the government cannot be the referee of what is and isn't acceptable criticism.
Is any speech ever restricted?
Of course. It's not absolute. You can't incite a mob to immediate violence. You can't defame someone with knowing lies. You can't shout fire in a crowded theater just to cause a panic. But simply being offensive or mean to a politician, that is highly protected.
Okay, let's move to due process. The notes highlight that this concept shows up in 2 different places, the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. Why is it in there twice?
This is a quick but vital history lesson. The Fifth Amendment was part of the original Bill of Rights from 1791. And at that time, the Bill of Rights was understood to only apply to the federal government.
Not the states.
No. So after the Civil War, we passed the 14th Amendment, which explicitly says, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." It applied the rule to the states.
So for the exam, a quick rule of thumb. If it's the FBI or another federal agency taking action, it's a Fifth Amendment issue. If it's the state police or a local city council, it's a 14th Amendment issue.
Perfect. But the legal test is essentially the same. And the source correctly splits this into 2 types, procedural and substantive.
This distinction can be really confusing. Let's break it down simply. Procedural due process.
Think of this as the checklist. Before the government can take away your life, your liberty, or your property, they have to follow a fair procedure. They have to jump through the right hoops.
The notes say notice and a hearing.
That's the core of it, yes. They have to tell you what they're doing and why, and they have to give you a chance to tell your side of the story.
Scenario. I'm a public school teacher. I have a contract, which means I have a property interest in my job. One day, the principal walks into my classroom and says, "Pack your things, you're fired."
Does he tell you why?
No. Does he give me a chance to argue my case? No. Just get out.
That is a classic violation of procedural due process. The government can't just take your job like that. They must give you notice, like a letter saying, "We are considering firing you because you were late 20 times. And a hearing, a chance to stand before a decision maker and say, "Here's why I was late. It was a medical issue."
Okay, so procedural is about the steps. Do they follow the rules of the game?
Exactly.
So then what on earth is substantive due process?
This isn't about the steps. This is about the government's fundamental power.
Yeah.
The idea is that some rights, some liberties, are so fundamental to being a free person that the government has basically no legitimate reason to take them away at all, no matter how much procedure they give you.
The source lists rights like privacy, the right to vote, and the right to travel.
Let's use the right to travel. Suppose a city is having a terrible traffic problem. To solve it, the city council passes a law. To reduce congestion, no new residents are allowed to move into this city. The border is closed.
And let's say they do it perfectly. They hold public hearings, they get citizen input, they give everyone notice. The procedure is flawless.
The law is still unconstitutional
Why?
because it violates your substantive right to travel and live wherever you want in this country. The government simply does not have the power to enact that law. It's an illegitimate end.
So, to summarize for the exam, procedural due process asks, how did the government do it? And substantive due process asks, Can the government do it at all?
That is a perfect way to put it.
Next up on our tour of rights, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
No state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. This is the great anti-discrimination clause of the Constitution.
So for the exam taker, anytime you see a law that sorts people into different groups and treats them differently, this alarm bell should be going off in your head.
Absolutely. If the law treats Group A differently than Group B, you have an equal protection issue.
Let's do a scenario involving gender. A state passes a new curfew law. It says, to keep the streets safe at night, all men must be indoors by 10 p.m. Women, however, can stay out as long as they want.
Okay. That law creates a classification based on sex or gender. It treats men and women differently.
Is that automatically unconstitutional?
Not automatically,
Yeah.
but it faces a very tough test called intermediate scrutiny. To uphold the law, the state has to prove that the classification is substantially related to achieving an important government interest.
And can they prove that here?
Almost certainly not. Why only men? Why 10 p.m.? It relies on outdated broad stereotypes about who is dangerous and who is in danger. A court would almost certainly strike that law down.
What if the law sorted people by race? Say, a law that only applied to one racial group.
Then it faces the highest test of all, strict scrutiny. The government has to prove the law is necessary to achieve a compelling interest, and it's narrowly tailored. The government almost always loses when a law is challenged on racial grounds.
Okay, last one in this big rights section, the Takings Clause of the Fifth Amendment.
The power of eminent domain.
I always thought of this as a government power, but we've listed it here under individual rights. Why?
Because it's both. The government absolutely has the power to take private property for public use.
Like building a highway or an airport or a public school.
Exactly. But the right belongs to the property owner. The Constitution says the government cannot take that property without just compensation.
Scenario. The government is building a new highway. My house is sitting right in the middle of the planned route. Can they force me to sell my house and move?
Yes. If the highway is a valid public use, they can force you out.
Can they say, sorry, this is for the public good and we're on a tight budget. We'll give you $10 in a coupon for a free pizza.
No. They must pay you just compensation. And that has a legal meaning. Fair market value. Whatever a willing buyer would pay a willing seller for your house on the open market. If that's $300,000, the government has to write you a check for $300,000.
But what if I love my house? What if my grandmother was born in that living room? It's priceless to me.
The Constitution is cold in calculating on this point. It does not pay for your sentimental value. It pays for the market value.
That's harsh, but it's a very clear rule. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground. We've got the structure, the relationships, and the rights. But we need to talk about the historical reset. Part 4. The Civil War amendments and enforcement.
You really can't understand the modern Constitution without this. The original document from 1787 had a fatal flaw. It protected and allowed slavery. The Civil War basically broke the house, and these Reconstruction Amendments were passed to rebuild it on a new foundation.
The trio. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments.
A quick recap is all you need. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, period. No more involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime.
The 15th Amendment protected the right to vote, saying it can't be denied on account of race.
And then there's the 14th. We keep coming back to it because it is the giant. It's the linchpin of modern constitutional law.
It redefined what it means to be a citizen.
It established birthright citizenship. If you are born here, you are a citizen. And as we discussed, it was the vehicle for applying most of the protections of the Bill of Rights to the states. It fundamentally changed the balance of power.
But here's the practical question for the lawyers listening. We have all these beautiful rights floating around in the constitutional clouds. How do you actually use them in a real lawsuit? You can't just walk into a courtroom and yell, "Liberty!"
You need a vehicle. You need a law passed by Congress, a statute that lets you into the courthouse. The source material points out two absolutely critical statutes that turn these constitutional ideas into actual lawsuits you can file.
The first one is 28 U.S.C. Section 1332.
Hey, we've talked about this already.
Yeah.
This is the statute that makes diversity jurisdiction real. It sets the actual rules of the road for it.
Right. We mentioned the parties have to be citizens of different states, but there's a math component here, too, that's in the statute.
Yes. For the statute to apply, the amount in controversy must exceed $75,000.
So let's go back to my sinking boat scenario. If the boat was only worth $20,000,
then you cannot go to federal court. Even though we are from different states, you don't meet the statutory requirement. The federal courts are for big cases. If it's $75,000 or less, the federal judge will kick it back to state court.
So it has to be at least $75,000 and one penny.
Exactly.
And the second statute, this is the real heavy hitter for civil rights. 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. Everyone just calls it Section 1983.
This is the weapon for civil rights lawyers. It's the most important tool in their toolbox.
So how does it work?
Well, the Constitution lists your rights: free speech, due process, freedom from unreasonable searches. But it doesn't have a price tag. It doesn't say if a police officer searches your house illegally, he owes you $10,000.
So Section 1983 is what fills that gap.
Precisely. Section 1983 is a law passed by Congress that creates a cause of action. It says, if any person acting under the authority of state law deprives you of your federal constitutional rights, they are liable to you for money damages.
So, back to our police search scenario. A cop illegally searches my house without a warrant. He breaks my door, trashes the place, finds nothing. He violated my Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches.
You don't sue him under the Fourth Amendment directly. You file a Section 1983 lawsuit. You claim that he, a person acting under the authority of the state, deprived you of your constitutional rights. Section 1983 is the bridge that connects the constitutional violation to the money you can recover.
Without that statute, the Constitution is just a beautiful piece of paper. The statute is what gives it teeth in court.
That is a perfect way to say it.
So what does this all mean for our architecture metaphor? We've looked at the foundation, the walls, the roof, and now the security system.
If you synthesize it all, the architecture of constitutional law is really about managing tension. It's a series of balancing acts. The separation of powers creates tension between the branches to prevent anyone from becoming a king. Federalism creates tension between the need for a strong, unified nation and the need for local control and diversity. And individual rights create tension between the power of the majority and the dignity and autonomy of a single person.
So it's not a peaceful house. It's a system of forces constantly pushing against each other.
And that tension, that managed conflict, is what's supposed to keep the house standing. If one side ever pulls too hard and wins completely, the whole structure collapses.
Before we sign off, I want to give one last, absolutely critical tip for the bar exam takers listening. The source material has a huge warning label on it about something called state action.
This is it. If you remember nothing else, remember this. This is the most common reason for a wrong answer on the multi-state bar exam. So listen to me closely.
What is the rule?
The Constitution, with very few exceptions, protects you only from the government. It protects you from state action. It does not protect you from your private neighbors or private companies.
Let's make this concrete with a scenario. I have a neighbor. He's a real jerk. I put a political sign in my front yard for a candidate he hates. He comes over and tells me, take that sign down. I hate that candidate. You're not allowed to express that opinion on this street.
Is he violating your First Amendment right to free speech?
It feels like he is. He's trying to censor me.
He is being a rude neighbor.
Yeah.
But he's not violating the Constitution. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. It restricts the government. Your neighbor is a private citizen. He can be as intolerant and censorship happy as he wants to be. The Constitution doesn't apply to him.
Okay, what about a private employer? Let's say I work for a private tech company. I write a personal blog post on the weekend that my boss doesn't like. On Monday, he fires me. Can I sue the company for violating my right to free speech?
No. Again, you might have a claim under your employment contract, but you do not have a constitutional claim. The First Amendment does not apply to your private employer. This is all about state action.
So on the exam, when you read a fact pattern, if it involves a private club, a private school, a private landlord, a private company,
you need to be very, very suspicious of any answer choice that says unconstitutional. You have to look for the government actor. Look for the police badge. Look for the city council ordinance. Look for the public school official. If there is no state action, the Constitution generally stays in the drawer.
that is a grade-saving tip right there.
It truly is.
And finally, a provocative thought to leave you with based on our discussion. We talked about cases and controversies. The idea that a federal court can't act until someone is actually hurt and brings a lawsuit.
Right. No advisory opinions.
Think about the implication of that for a second. Imagine Congress passes a law tomorrow that establishes a secret surveillance program. It secretly monitors everyone's emails.
That's pretty scary.
Let's assume it's clearly, blatantly unconstitutional, a violation of the Fourth Amendment. But because the program is a secret, nobody knows they're being monitored.
And if you don't know you're being monitored, you can't prove that you've been injured.
And if you can't prove you've been injured, you don't have standing to sue. You don't have a case or controversy.
So the court cannot hear the case.
So the law just sits there. It is unconstitutional, but it is untouchable by the courts because of the procedural rules of the architecture itself.
Which raises a really fascinating question.
Hmm?
Is that a bug in the system that allows tyranny to flourish in secret?
Mhm.
Or is it a feature designed to keep unelected judges from meddling in everything until there's a real concrete harm to address?
Something to chew on while you're driving to the testing center.
Indeed.
All right, to everyone out there prepping for this exam, take a deep breath. Visualize the house. Find the foundation. Look for the beams. You are going to crush it.
Good luck. You've got this.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.